Welcome to the SparkCom podcast. I'm Manny Turan.
And I'm Adam Hartung.
And we're the Spark Partners. Our show, we talk about innovation, trends, and how to change your mindset to think like an innovator. How's it going today, Adam?
It's going good. And I have a question for you, Manny. When was the last time you ate a bologna sandwich?
Bologna sandwich, good Lord. I would say over 5 years, maybe 10 years.
Wow, that's a lot earlier than me. I know I haven't had one for probably 30 years. Do you remember if your bologna had a name?
Of course it did.
What was it?
Oscar Mayer.
Oh, of course, right? So we all know Oscar Mayer. And did you have a piece of cheese on it?
Probably so.
And who made the cheese, you suppose?
Let me think about that. Probably Kraft.
Kraft. See, these are the names. These are the consumer products names that we've all come to know and love. And today's show, we're going to take some time to talk about what happens when you start to rest on your laurels and you forget about the customer and spend way too much time thinking that you know what's going on in the world and you have all the answers. Today, we're going to talk about a story that gets at the notion of if you don't know where you're going, any road will lead you there. We've all heard that from Lewis Carroll, Alice in Wonderland, right? But How often do we think it applies to us? We've got some companies here to talk about today that apply to in a really, really, really big way. So, Kraft. Kraft, America spells cheese.
Kraft.
Right, we learned all that watching television, didn't we? Founded in 1923 by a guy named Thomas McInerney. He wanted to try to consolidate the dairy industry. Now think about this. This is the birth of the industrial era. I mean, we're really coming of age into it, I should say, birthed in the 1890s. But people are really starting to think about productivity. And so he goes to New York and he raises money. And his whole idea is to consolidate the ice cream business. That's really what he wants to do. He keeps buying up ice cream companies until by 1930, his company is the largest ice cream company in the world. In fact, it's the largest dairy company in the world. Second largest is Borden. So then we see this grand era from 1930 that runs well up into the 1970s, where we see the people of the world start to tune into radio, then start to tune into television. We see the birth of the giant grocery stores, and this all creates what we come to know as the consumer goods industry, right? Yep. Brands advertised on radio, brands advertised on television, and certainly Oscar Mayer and Kraft are a couple of the biggest, best-known brands overall, and then their sub-brands like Philadelphia cream cheese are known, and Breyer's ice cream, Seal Test are known as well. Now, this is all pretty good. It's fine. And then around 1980, Kraft goes about buying up Duracell batteries, Tupperware, and West Bend appliances. Now, why do you suppose they did that, Manny?
Well, the thinking of the day was to, quote unquote, diversify their portfolio, perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, we got a lot of money. Ice cream's a pretty profitable business. And so we're going to go buy up some other businesses. Now, when I say those three names, Duracell, okay, that got sold to Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway. But Tupperware and West Bend, those are a couple names you haven't heard for a while, I guess, right?
Well, maybe Tupperware, but definitely not West Bend.
So you say to yourself, what do you suppose their selection criteria was when they bought these companies?
It was likely that they were for sale.
Yeah, they're for sale, and somebody sat down with a real paper spreadsheet and a pencil and ran a whole bunch of numbers trying to figure out, oh, okay, could we buy this thing? And if we advertised it a lot, would we sell more stuff, right?
Right.
Now, what they didn't do was ask customers if they wanted more of that stuff, did they?
Right.
Right. So there we got this company, 1980, world largest dairy company. It's making these acquisitions that, in hindsight, we can look at it and say, well, does that make any sense? In 1985, Philip Morris, you know Philip Morris Company, a cigarette company?
Absolutely.
Became Altria, got renamed to Altria. So they bought General Foods. And General Foods owned Oscar Mayer, okay? And then in 1988, Philip Morris bought Kraft. And they put Kraft and General Foods together as a company. Now, why do you suppose Philip Morris bought General Foods and Kraft?
Well, it could be because of all of the cigarette issues, and they could see a cliff in the future when perhaps cigarettes would be either heavily taxed or banned, or the general trend in the decrease of use of tobacco products.
By the 1980s, it's, now the cat's out of the bag. Everybody knows you're going to get cancer if you smoke cigarettes. It's bad for your health. There's nothing good about the cigarette itself. Business is going to decline. So now they decide, well, we're making a lot of money selling cigarettes, like the obvious sin product. It's a very, very profitable product. And we, like Kraft had been, have this money to spend. What do you suppose their selection criteria was for going around and making an acquisition that they would pick General Foods and Kraft?
Probably the same thing. They were for sale. They diversified their portfolio, and likely was just kind of made sense on the spreadsheet.
What we see here again, another internal focus, right? We're in the cigarette business. We know how to distribute cigarettes. We've been big in advertising. Remember the Marlboro Man?
Yeah.
Way back in the day. So they'd done a lot of advertising, spent a lot of money, had a lot of skill around advertising. They said, here are other consumer goods companies. So we're going to buy somebody like us. When they say like us, they mean like their value delivery system. Somebody else who makes a product, it's a consumer good, it's sold in the grocery store, it's sold in a lot of different locations like quick shops, et cetera. All they're looking at are the operational elements. Distribution, put stuff on a truck, going to the same place. Manufacturing plants roughly located in the same locations. They're looking at everything except the customer. You start seeing yourself, okay, what was the value proposition that Kraft had? What was the value proposition General Foods had? What was the value proposition that Philip Morris had? They had no clue, right? They have no clue what the value proposition is. All instead, they're looking completely internally at their own business, trying to figure out kind of how it's going to operate. So this goes along until about 2001, okay, now. So that acquisition was 88. And in 2001, Philip Morris, in 2000, they bought Nestle. Then 2001, they said, you know what? We're really not getting much out of this. Like we bought all this stuff, we slammed it all together. So we got, Nestle and Oscar Mayer and Jell-O, and we've got Kraft and Cracker Barrel and Seal Test. And all of it's just a mumbo jumbo list of a bunch of products that are being sold, but they're not making any money with it really. So they listed on the stock exchange in 2001. And what's interesting about this was at the time, I got really fascinated with it. And so I started doing a lot of research on Kraft around that period. And we advance up to 2005, okay? So in 2005, they published, they listed Kraft on the stock exchange. Philip Morris is slowly selling its shares. By 2007, it completely sells all of its shares. But we get this release, we get an annual report, we got all this information on Kraft. So we look at the annual report in 2005, and they say, yeah, since we've been 2001 collecting data on this as an independent company, effectively revenues have not grown at all.
Yeah.
And so you said, well, okay, what were your revenues from new products in 2004? So just guess percentage of revenues in 2004 that came from new products. This is Kraft, General Foods, all those, Nabisco, all those things. New products accounted for what percentage of revenues?
I would say 5%.
Oh, well, you're optimistic. It was 3%. 3%. So if you have this multi-billion-dollar company, at the time the revenues were over $30 billion, which was big by today's standards. It was huge by those standards.
Yeah.
And they could not have any new products. In fact, the last new product they had launched was DiGiorno. Do you even remember that? Yeah, the DiGiorno pizza line, 1995. That was the last product that had been launched by all of those companies combined. In fact, it's still the last new product launched by all of those companies combined.
That's a little crazy.
Yeah, so I have some information I want to pull over here to make sure I get it right. Of what they said in their 2005 annual report about 2004. They said that they were absolutely certain in their by-the-numbers management style that they were spending all their money on existing brands because it would be wasteful to try to spend it anywhere else. That the growth rate was okay, even though it was less than 3%. Here are their plans for how to be successful in the future. Better packaging, and by that they meant they were going to introduce resealable packages, and new packages for the super centers, meaning really big packages of product, right?
Okay.
We're going to manage price gaps. You know what that means, Manny?
It all has to do with the operational efficiency of their manufacturing.
Yeah. So they say, okay, over here we got an 8-slice pack of American cheese and it's $1. And then we have a 32-slice pack of American cheese is $3. Let's introduce a 16-slice pack of cheese for $2 because we have a gap between 1 and 3. It's literally taking the same product and repackaging it in order to try to cover a bunch more price points with the same product. And then the last one was that they were going to be sure to focus on restructuring and lowering costs. Those were the 3 primary plans for 2005. Their goal was to increase their global share in existing businesses and make strategic divestitures so they could decomplex, that's their word, not mine, decomplex through SKU rationalization. You know what SKU rationalization means?
Getting rid of more SKUs.
Exactly.
More products.
So here you have a company. Now let's go through this, what I've just gone through, the history of this company over the course of about 80 years, right? 1925, they set out to be the largest ice cream company. They accomplished that. They become the largest dairy company. Because they're collecting all those products up, they get huge, not only in ice cream, but cheese. In the dairy business, you collect eggs. So because they're collecting eggs, they end up in the mayonnaise business. That's where Miracle Whip and all that comes from, right? Salad dressings is because they were collecting eggs. So they get built. All this is building a business until they get to 1980. Then in 1980, they're sort of like, what are we going to do next? And they didn't ever go ask the customer what they should do next, right? They didn't say, well, what's our value proposition? What do we know? How could we do something great, something new? Could we pioneer or innovate in the field of dairy? Now, it's not that it wasn't possible. Have you ever bought dairy products in Canada or in Europe and noticed something distinctive about it?
Yeah, seems to be more higher quality, better selection. And I guess more little cottage brands. I don't remember seeing some big brands out there.
Packaging?
The packaging, yeah, it's pretty nice packaging.
They use aseptic packaging. Remember, it's little boxes like we get high C drink in. They put the milk in that so it's shelf stable. Doesn't have to be refrigerated, right? So this was one of the big innovations that was happening in the 1970s and 1980s in the dairy business, was you change the processing where, literally from the cow to the package, such that you keep it at a certain temperature and you can package it with no air, and it's called an aseptic packaging, and you can keep a shelf-stable product. You put milk on the shelf and leave it there for 6 months. And it could come, and they were selling it primarily in half pint, and quart, American designations. They would have been doing it in liter and then half liter, quarter liter packaging. Whereas we're trying to just pump gallons of milk out the door, right? And large pounds of cheese, these kinds of things. And in Europe, we're seeing the distribution of more kinds of cheese. Americans had largely had few selections. We weren't a cheese exotic country by any stretch of the imagination, like say the French were, but it was starting to spread. It was definitely spreading across Europe. It was spreading across most of the world. But you don't see Kraft sit down and say, wait a minute, how would we help with that trend? People with taste. So trying to improve the product, improve the packaging so we could be better. You don't see any of that. Instead, you see, oh, let's go buy Tupperware, right?
Yeah, and it's remarkable that they had that much clout and that much cash, and they really had the attention of the consumer from their point of view.
Yeah.
Not from the consumer point of view.
Now, all of this is happening, but the one big group that's not making any money are the investors. This is doing nothing for the investors at Kraft or at General Foods or at Philip Morris, or that we relaunch Kraft again as a company and it's Kraft General Foods. No, none of the investors are winning at this. None of the employees are winning at this, right? Employees aren't getting big bonuses. This isn't a great, wonderful place to work on the way up. Revenues are growing 10%. We're all going to get, do really, really well. We're going to get more up management. No, it's a culture that's just flat. Completely flat. Little growth, no growth in the company, not even keeping up with inflation, right? Remember inflation of the 70s and the early 80s? Not keeping up with inflation by any stretch of the imagination. And suppliers are seeing their products, the value of their products go down. Not that the price of milk's going up. In fact, the opposite. In real dollars, because of inflation, the price of milk is falling dramatically. Yeah. So nobody's winning here except a handful of senior people at the top of the organization who are giving themselves budgets for financial machinations. We're bolting this together and unbolting it, bolting this thing together, unbolting it. And each time we turn the bolts, the guys at the top say, give me a $10 million bonus, right? Because they did wonderful stuff. And they go hire an investment banker and they say, we'll give him a $10 million bonus for helping us put the bolt to screw it together. And then 4 years later, we unscrew it. Somebody else gets another bonus. But the constituencies, the people you care about, the workers, employees, the people in the communities, the grocers that are selling the product, they're getting nothing out of any of this behavior. So the answer becomes, Irene Rosenfeld becomes the CEO, and she says, I'm going to go for global growth. I'm going to buy Cadbury. Now, I'm not going to ask you why she bought Cadbury, because the reason was so bizarre. It was because Cadbury was the #1 chocolate in Brazil, and it was growing at 16%. And her reasoning was, if she bought Cadbury, she could somehow find a way to take the other products in Kraft General Foods and push them into Brazil and South America. Now, she didn't ask anybody in Brazil if they were needing Velveeta or Kraft macaroni and cheese in a box. None of these questions were asked. Instead, it was, oh, look, we've got all these products. Here's this candy company out of England, right, that's selling chocolates. And because they've got a distribution in Brazil and South America, this will open the doors for us to be wildly successful. So she buys Cadbury, which leads to the decision in 2011 to split the company in half. Because this works so badly, it achieves absolutely nothing. Why? Because we're still not talking to the customers, right? We have no value proposition. Everything you're reading is how we're going to be more synergistic, cut costs, all these kinds of things are what's going to happen. So they split the company in two in 2012. Now you've got Mondelez. It's no longer Kraft. We're going to give us his name, Mondelez, right? Why? Well, because of the whole Brazilian bullshit thing, right, that was going on. But it's going nowhere. So just take a guess what's happened to the revenue of Mondelez between 2012 and 2020.
I would say it's pretty flat.
Dropped from $35 billion to $26 billion.
Wow, that's a big drop.
So that's the snack food business that Ms. Rosenfeld created, but gave herself a nice $100 million bonus for creating it, and then gave herself a nice $50 million bonus when she walks out the door after she does the split and then the board tells the board to have somebody else run the company. So she gets some money, but everybody else is just watching this thing deteriorate. Mondelez is going nowhere. The S&P 500 goes up, and Mondelez literally performs at 50%. So if you put $1 in the S&P 500 or the Dow, you'd have $2. If you put the dollar into Mondelez, you would have $1.50. Okay, that's how well they perform. Now let's take the other side. That's the split off of now what's called Kraft Foods again. Okay, so Kraft Foods, they're going out in the market in 2012. Somebody says, "Hey, you're not big enough," and has the brilliant idea to smash them together with Heinz. Why? Right? Why? When I say Heinz, what do you think of, Manny?
Ketchup, of course.
Ketchup. What was the last big innovation you saw in ketchup?
The upside down squeeze bottle.
Yeah, right. Do you remember green ketchup?
Barely, yeah.
Yeah, like 1991, 92.
Yeah.
Somebody had the bright idea if we put green food coloring in it. Yeah, it didn't work so well. Who wants to eat green ketchup, right?
No,
so you got two companies now, the three, Mondelez, Kraft Foods, and Heinz, which have no innovation, no sense of the market. They're not following any trends whatsoever. They're just looking at their operations and saying, how do we grow these operations? How do we put more product through what we have? How do we try to maximize what we do on our value delivery system? So what happens now we've smashed up Kraft-Heinz in 2015. What happens to Kraft-Heinz? What do you suppose happened to the revenue of Kraft-Heinz between 2015 and 2020?
Well, my gut tells me it's flat, but likely it probably went down.
It was flat because we're talking about Velveeta, Philadelphia cream cheese, Heinz ketchup. So pretty much the marketplace didn't go anywhere for 5 years, right? But here's the bad part. The stock market goes up about 50%, 60%. The value of Kraft-Heinz drops 60%. So if you'd have bought $1 worth, it was worth 40 cents at the end of 2019. So they're getting crushed. So what's the brilliant answer now, Manny? Have you heard what they're going to do next?
Sell it off. Break it up.
Right. So they made the announcement recently that they're going to take the cheese business, the Kraft cheese business is going to get sold to a French cheese company so they can increase their distribution in the United States. A footnote to that was they're getting $3 billion for the U.S. business because they sold the Canadian business last year. and far less fanfare. For $1.2 billion, they'd already sold the Kraft cheese business in Canada off.
Yeah.
So now we will have left a Kraft Foods business, and the only cheese they have is Velveeta.
That's remarkable.
100 years.
Yeah, for 100 years, they're top of their game. Well, not even that much, but for at least 60 years, they're top of their game,
Yeah.
or 50. And then they lost sight of the customer and the needs of the customer.
I mean, it's kind of remarkable. 100-year-old company and the billions and billions of dollars of revenue. But what they did was they never got their eyes on the prize. They never said, hey, look, here's our key value. Now, they had it originally, the key value proposition. I cut myself off. Key value proposition, what they needed. When Thomas McInerney was starting the company, he wanted to make a very productive ice cream company so he could distribute ice cream across the United States, a high-quality product. And he did. You know, he had Seal Test, he had Breyers, and a lot of other brands that went across the country. He made great ice cream. In the process, they made some good cheese, too. You know, at a time when America didn't have the consistent cheese across the country, Kraft came in and you could get consistent cheese. Now, it wasn't a high variety, but it was a consistent, cheddar-style cheeses that you could get under their branding. And it grew the business because they knew their value proposition. And in fact, a lot of people don't realize the origination of Velveeta had a very, very practical purpose. American cooks didn't know how to make sauces, didn't know how to make cheese sauces. Most of them were immigrants. They'd perhaps seen cheese sauces made by their parents or grandparents, but they didn't learn how to cook and make a cheese sauce. And so they would, if you've ever tried to make a cheese sauce from scratch, it is challenging. So Kraft innovated Velveeta, which is, put it in a pan, turn on the heat, and you get runny cheese. You get a cheese sauce, right?
Yeah, right.
It may not be the best, but it filled a need. It was a great innovation that helped them sell their product. It met a customer need. That's what we saw the company do all the way up until 1980.
So let's talk about how what they should have done, right? Let's take a crystal ball, rewind, we'll say 20 years.
Right.
And, looking at the change in the customer's taste, the growing trends of health foods, what should they have done in, we'll say 20 years ago?
So the obvious thing here is that let's say that you forgive them the mistakes of the 1980s. We'll say, okay, the launch of the MBAs, it's the launch of the strategy consulting firms. Everybody's talking about how to grow your share and, advanced productivity and that sort of stuff. So we let them get away with all the productivity they thought they would get by combining ad agencies and combining distribution centers and all that of the 1980s. But when that doesn't add value, right? At that point, you have to say, wait a minute, let's quit looking inside and let's look outside. Right? They should have, by 2004, 2005, they should have said, look, we're a standalone company. We're on our own. Let's go out there and let's develop the markets that people want, So let's create. Just because it says Kraft on the door doesn't mean we can't create healthy foods, right? It didn't have to be even cheese. It doesn't even have to be dairy, right? It could be anything. So we could have gone after any number of healthy foods, but we didn't even necessarily have to stay in the foods market. We could have said, what is it that consumer goods that people are looking for that would help them? So what do we see emerging? We see the growth of sports drinks, right?
Yeah.
Energy drinks. These are all things coming down the pike. They're not inherently something that need to go to a Pepsi or a Coca-Cola, right? That soft drink business, we already had Snapple. Snapple was not invented by the soft drink company. Snapple was its own brand that came out of New York, right? And it had been developed and then ended up with Quaker Oats. So there was alternative products. People were looking for alternatives to what they bought. They're looking for things sometimes with a little bit of a health to it. But I wouldn't necessarily say Snapple was a healthier drink. It was just an alternative drink. Instead of drinking a Coke or a Pepsi, I could have an iced tea. And like I said, then we had the emergence had come up with the sports drinks for sure, right? With Gatorade, where that was headed. So there were other categories they could have looked at in food, but it was farther afield. And what they should have said is, where are the customers and where are the customers going? Are sports drinks going to be consumed by football players on the field, or are people going to drink it at home when they got to go outside and mow the grass?
Right. So they seemingly missed the boat. It'll be curious to see what happens just to the aftermath here as we wind down today's show, and just really see what happens with these. I mean, they've already made lots of bad decisions, and they're pretty much no longer who they once were. So we'll see what happens.
I think one of the things to keep in mind here is that it was possible to predict this. If you go back and look at some papers that I wrote and published back in 2000 and 2005, you'll see that I was very clear at saying that I didn't think Kraft would pull themselves out. A lot to do with the fact they didn't have any new products, the whole DiGiorno thing being the one product out there. So what we can learn from this is we can learn how to predict how our competitors will behave, recognize the ones that are locked in and not doing good things. And as entrepreneurs say, we don't have to worry about them coming into our market. If you wanted to launch off a high-end cheese brand, there was no way they were going to stop you, right? If you wanted to launch in a competitive product against what though Kraft General Foods, Nabisco was trying to get to market, it was there for you.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much, Adam, for your time today. And thank you for our listeners that were part of the show. Please tune us in and go to our website, sparkpartners.com, and looking forward to next time we talk.
Thanks, Manny. Have a good one.
You too. Take care, Adam.